Hello, viewers, and welcome to the latest episode of The Huddle. Tim Poole here, editor of Gambling Insider, and I'm with Mark O'Sullivan, head of M&A at Exacta Solutions. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you on. Looking forward to, as your job title suggests, we're going to talk about M&A, a specialism of Exacta's. Looking forward to sort of talking to you about M&A in 2023. Start a question. Has 2023 M&A in gaming been busier or quieter than usual?
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer fully. We're almost at the end of the year, but yeah, I guess it's been an interesting year. I mean, if we kind of cycle back a little bit, I mean, I would have got involved in M&A back at KPMG a few years back, and M&A was rampant in the industry back then, over kind of 2018 until 2021, I suppose. Then COVID kicked off, and things went very quiet. Any sports betting deals that were happening were on their knees because sports was also on its knees and not happening. So that kind of, interestingly opened up the casino sector a little bit more, or iGaming, as some people would know it. Yeah, a lot of deals started kind of occurring within that sector. And then 2022, I suppose things normalized a little bit. COVID normalized too, to some extent, and the world kind of got back on its feet. And yeah, things started picking up. And then kind of this year, probably it started well, and then we have this kind of looming recession, which has been kind of with us for probably, I don't know, 6, 9 months for sure, in a real sense, with the US Fed hiking interest rates and various kind of signs of a recession or trying to prevent one at least. And that's had an effect too. It makes capital more expensive for those acquiring companies, and then on the other hand, it also creates a kind of disparity between multiples that sellers want versus multiples that buyers are willing to pay. So it's been an interesting year. Still, some massive deals have happened. There's been some really mega deals, like Aristocrat Neo Games or STS, SKS 365 more recently. Some pretty large deals. But those kind of deals in the billions don't seem to have happened this year at the same frequency, at least, as over the last couple of years. So interesting to see where next year brings us.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned your background in M&A, and you mentioned sort of KPMG. Exacta Solutions has been on the Huddle before, but of course it's your first guest appearance. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of your background in M&A, and as you mentioned, it kind of gives you that reference point to what it's like now, and you've seen changes throughout the years.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I joined Exacta Solutions about 2 years ago. I've known one of the founders, Anthony Hennessy, for quite a few years. Actually, since I arrived in Malta almost 6 years ago now, time flies. And I suppose I learned the ropes at KPMG in Malta as a gaming specialist and involved in M&A projects. And then, Exacta Solutions had been doing some M&A work in a kind of hands-off sense, doing some introductions between, buyers and sellers, or companies looking to raise money and potential investors, and had done some successfully in that time, but realized that it was a division within the company they wanted to be there for the longer term, and realized they didn't have the time probably themselves, running the recruitment side of the business, and then Chris running the overall business, to actually put into M&A, and realized they needed someone more hands-on. So I joined. In that time, we've had some success. Probably the most public of which we could talk about is Necton's sale to OpenBet, back in the middle of this year. That was a case we were on the sell side of. It was a long deal, for anyone listening who was involved in it. They know all about it. Took probably close to a year to close, during which there was, issues around COVID, recession issues, interest rate hikes, various things that complicated the deal, not least just deal fatigue. A deal that goes on for, 9 to 12 months starts to kind of affect everybody mentally, and it just kind of it's not a nice environment towards the end. There's always the big crunch towards the end, but yeah, glad to kind of have got that one over the line in challenging circumstances. And yeah, I guess that's kind of a bit of background on myself and where I've come from.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned the deal fatigue. I worked at Ladbrokes when it merged with Coral, and over a long time, that process, you could sense that in the office, thousands of employees, some not knowing whether their contracts are being extended or not. So even from a personal level, I totally get that concept of deal fatigue. You also talked earlier about how the recession is sort of affecting M&A and gaming at the moment. How would the sort of volume of gaming M&A in gaming, sorry, volume of M&A in gaming compare with other industries at the moment, given the recession is something that's going to affect people across the board?
Yeah, it's interesting, particularly on the time of year. So, myself, probably I spend most time aside from the online gambling industry in the video game sector, kind of an adjacent industry, also entertainment driven, but it is very different. I wouldn't want to predict exactly, but Christmas is around the corner, and typically that's the biggest season of the year for video games, and I'll be very curious to see what consumer spending is like in that sector. The kind of new consoles and that kind of thing have been out a couple of years now, and usually usually kind of that creates a spike. I'd be interested to see if that kind of continues into this festive season. I think that will have a kind of marked effect on the reality of whether recession exists or not. Because if we boil it right down, if families are struggling over the festive period around Christmas presents and that kind of thing, that's typically a very good indicator and an unfortunate one as to where we're at. As for whether or not we're in a recession or not, or whatever it might be, um, I'm Irish. I'd be very hesitant to suggest when or if we're in a recession, because we had quite the headache back in 2007, 8 by thinking we weren't in a recession when in fact we probably had already been in it for a year before we realized, and the effects were staggering basically. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I can't comment on every type of industry, but certainly on gambling and video games, I know where it's at, and this will be an interesting season.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, we're actually considering whether to buy the new Call of Duty, and exactly those reasons are coming into effect. We're thinking, it might not be worth it. So yeah, maybe I'll let you know how that goes on a micro level, and then on a macro level, you can see how it goes across the market. In terms of specific gaming M&A deals, I mean, you mentioned a few earlier. STS one was certainly interesting, given that inadvertently the Entain CEO has now left, and there was a lot of criticism about that deal. Personally, I'd say I'm surprised that Evolution hasn't done a bigger deal this year, because every year there seemed to be a big one from that company. But in your opinion, what have been I mean, maybe just even the ones you said would have been the biggest deals in the industry this year?
Yeah, I mean, there have been some big ones, obviously. A lot of it, I guess, stems down to the fact that, well, not the fact, at least my view of it, that kind of European.com operations are a thing of the past to some extent. The Malta license doesn't allow you to target quite as many jurisdictions as you used to be able to, and that kind of thing. And what that lends itself to, I believe Entain had previously titled it like kind of local heroes,
Mm.
right? So acquiring kind of the best operators in specific jurisdictions, not those spread over 10, 15 jurisdictions, but those who are really strong in one or two. So deals like Betfirst acquired by Betson out in Belgium, then that's an interesting one where that's exactly that case. They'd be top two, top three in the market over there, and they decided that's the one we go and get. We get a good foothold in that market, and kind of see if we can take or retain a number one spot. Bet City in the Netherlands will be relatively similar as well. Again, another Entain one, but yeah, I guess in a growing market, and then the STS one too, which was under criticism, I guess. Generally speaking, Entain has done some very big ticket acquisitions over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, some of it also hasn't worked out. The likes of Unicorn and stuff as well. I would never point fingers, because it's a very hard game to play, M&A, and not every decision will be the correct one. You have to take the kind of overall group of deals as one, and see where
Mhm.
it gets you in 3 to 5 years. I'm sure there's some master plan behind all of this, which brings Entain from A to B. So far be it for me to criticize. But yeah, those are like some of the deals. I mean, the comment on Evo and what it's done. Obviously, I've made some very big ones in the last 2 or 3 years. There's no limit though, I guess, to discuss, and not a small deal. And yeah, I'm sure they're looking at a few things. I've heard some whispers, so I wouldn't be surprised if something big lands in the first half of next year.
That's very interesting because I also want to ask you kind of what trends to expect in 2024. Before we get there, though, maybe we can discuss some deals that almost happened or didn't happen, because we've had some reports even recently. For example, Playtech bidding for 888. Again, DraftKings bidding for 888. I mean, there were some deals, I guess you could say, that almost happened that would have changed the industry for sure, but didn't quite cross the line.
Yeah, there's always deals of that ilk kind of floating around the industry. I'm aware of quite a few large suppliers who are, open to selling or indeed looking to sell. Again, the biggest issue that they're having is around multiples and what people are willing to pay. There are some factors that affect that. If you talk about interest rates being hiked as high as they are and potentially going even higher, that kind of makes your investment decision harder, because there's safer money that will give you returns, right?
Yeah.
Aside from just your organic growth, which you know well and which you can kind of achieve growth with probably. Um, I think when you talk about like failed deals, like Playtech's a very interesting one because they had, a kind of counterparty bidder separate to Aristocrat, which had kind of stepped on their toes, created a whole kerfuffle in the deal, and it didn't happen in the end as a result. Interestingly, since that kind of occurred, at a time when capital markets were better and at a time where multiples were higher, they've since gone the other direction, have started doing acquisitions of their own, and quite a few over the last few months. Now, I that would tell me that they're probably realizing that they're not going to get the price for sale that they want at the moment, and that they're going to give it another 6 months or a year before they start looking into that again, in the hope that any recession fears pass, that interest rates calm down, and that the kind of, I suppose, just general fear in the M&A world dies down, and then maybe look to sell a group that's even better founded, better padded than it was at the time where they tried to sell it before.
Yeah, really interesting. Playtech's a fascinating case study. It usually is, wherever it is in its cycle. I think it's with respect, it was bigger than it is now, but you can never discount it. So that's really a compliment I'm paying to it. Its market capitalization and share price is not what it used to be, but it's still in the center of a lot of these conversations.
Yeah, of course. I mean, share prices are up and down always. When the market's down, the share price is down.
Yeah.
It's very hard to go against the grain. So, but agreed. And there is a kind of secondary piece there as well, which is failed sales or M&A activity generally don't have a good impact on share price as well. So, what people might consider there is that the kind of bidders conducted due diligence, various things happened and they weren't happy with what they found, can often be the case there. And that's why share price maybe goes down, because people think that Playtech isn't as good as it was expected to be.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that there were probably 50 other factors at play, including capital markets, recessions, and various things,
Yeah.
and the kind of lingering COVID effects as well, that may have played into that. Not necessarily an issue of Playtech, but possibly just of the industry. So interesting to see what happens next year with Playtech, and if they actually want to sell again.
Sure. Final area, looking ahead to 2024, when we've already talked about a couple of companies specifically, but I guess more generally, what kind of trends are you expecting M&A wise from everything you've seen and heard next year? And in terms of trends, I think 1 or 2 years back there was a trend of operators sort of buying suppliers, getting their technology. That seems to have calmed down a little bit, as we said, almost went the other way with Playtech bidding for 888. And of course, it's slightly different to general M&A, but the kind of SPAC trend of going public, it seems well in the past now as well.
Yeah, I guess there's a few questions within that. So when we talk about yeah, SPACs and that kind of thing, that seems like a thing of the past. Again, I feel like it's like you could liken it to blockchain and stuff, where the focus was the kind of process or the technology, not the actual outcome or what the
Mhm.
purpose was. So SPACs have a particular use case, and they were being far overused to kind of shoehorn in deals that maybe didn't make sense. So a kind of quick route to listing, when in fact that's not necessarily a good thing, especially if capital markets are difficult. So I'm not sure about all of that, and if it will pick up again as things
Mhm.
ease. In terms of trends for next year, it's been a lot of sorry if I rephrase, a lot of the activity has been about entering jurisdictions for the big guys, kind of mopping up those local heroes on the B2C basis, or acquiring kind of technologies then that kind of support what they're doing. That will start to show its effects in the next year or two as they integrate within the group. Things like Angstrom Sports from Entain, then like that was a huge price for a company that wasn't really doing a huge amount of revenue. Now they obviously have bigger plans for how that's going to integrate within the group and give them an edge over competitors. If if that kind of pays off, then we'll see it in the results next year. So some of this stuff is kind of more midterm, longer term in nature. In terms of like types of trends that I'm seeing, I think social will kind of have a bit of a resurgence. There were some failed attempts at merging social media and gambling, which have kind of come and gone. But
Mhm.
I'm starting to see a lot of stuff pop up. So when I say social, I'm talking about companies like Dabble in Australia, then, who've kind of made a real mark on the Australian market, and people seem to like it. It's adding a social component to the whole experience that creates some competition among friends. Puts the whole experience into something that they're using day to day, as opposed to kind of just once a week to place a bet. It becomes more of a ritual. Go and log in every day, see what the friends are betting on, see whatever. That kind of experience is very interesting. And then there are some kind of similar merged experiences with things like Telegram casinos and that type of stuff, where um you're going in, you're searching for a casino as you would a friend, and sort of talking to the casino to place your bets and that kind of thing. That's very interesting, and also in some ways a step back 20, 30 years to some extent, where people used to do dial-a-bet, right? Where I'm Irish, Paddy Power always had a massive dial-a-bet function. Friends of mine used to work there, and you've got Joe Blogs from down the road calling in to place his €50 bet at the weekend. It's not too dissimilar in terms of experience, and just how quick it can be to place a bet, and to avoid all the rigmarole of going searching for your bet within a sports book, and trying to find the page, and then try to find the market, try to find your bet, all of that. So any experiences like that bring the player from A to B, A being kind of entering the experience, and B actually placing a bet. Anything that brings those two things closer is likely to have a big effect on the industry, and M&A will follow that as kind of KPIs improve as a result of these social technologies. Those technologies will be mopped up, would be my estimation of next year. Aside from that, I think these kind of market entries will continue, the ones we mentioned earlier in Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, obviously the US will continue as it has done. Be interesting to see what happens with Fanatics and PointsBet then, and equally, maybe more interesting even, would be what's happened with ESPN and Penn, where obviously, some of the most interesting deals are the cheapest ones. So Penn offloading Barstool for $1 or whatever
Yeah.
it was, is as cheap as a deal gets. But equally probably paves the way for them to go and do the ESPN deal, and see where that takes them next year. Apparently, I'm not as close to it as US players, obviously, or US analysts, but I believe the results have been pretty phenomenal, and better than expected in the first couple of weeks. So I'll be very curious to see where that goes next year. Um, And yeah, if I have one other probably estimation of next year, it would be continued offloading of affiliate assets by those looking to spend more in LATAM and the US and potentially
Hmm.
Africa. Um, it's already happened quite a bit. Catina's offloaded most of its assets recently. And Excel had done some similar stuff earlier in the year. Why I mention that and why it's interesting is that kind of paves the way for some of the mid-sized groups to actually take a real foothold in the affiliate sector and, bring their revenues up closer to where those big guys are that are listed. Um, those big guys you talk about, Katina, Excels, all these guys, they are, laser focused on the US. And again, that's a big risk and a big bet. It may pay off or it may not. And if it doesn't pay off as expected and share prices don't kind of increase as they hope, um, some of those kind of mid-sized guys will take sorry, excuse me, some of those mid-sized guys will go past him, in at least in terms of revenues, very quickly. And that's going to be very interesting and create a lot of competition in the industry as well.
Yeah, lots of interesting points there. I mean, the US and the operator landscape. We could probably spend another half an hour talking about just that. And in fact, I have done that on a few huddles with different execs, some based in the US. You mentioned the social point. I think even this week, Hard Rock Games was formed, kind of free-to-play mobile gaming. That probably kind of speaks to that trend a little bit as well. And when you said of the offloading affiliate assets, yeah, Katina came to mind straight away because Michael Daly has also been on the huddle. His brief has just been, yep, offload certain assets, balancing the balance sheet and that kind of thing. And yeah, plenty to look forward to. I mean, my mind's almost blown with everything everything we're talking about here. But maybe a final note. Maybe we'll be careful here, but I don't know if there's any specific predictions you want to make. And I say be careful because you may work with some of these companies. I'm not sure, but I don't know if a chance for you to say, hey, look back on this huddle. I said it would happen. The floor is yours.
I think I've got a much greater chance of being wrong about these than right. So maybe let me skip that prediction if you don't mind.
No, fair enough. But
And equally, in the interest of some clients as well, that I shouldn't spill the beans. But
absolutely
yeah,
not.
nice
Yeah.
question. I'll pay attention to other people's answers.
No, a very very diplomatic answer. I thought I've got to ask, but no, I appreciate how these things go down. But I mean, we have mentioned a few companies already, and interesting. You said that the whispers you heard earlier. Yeah, we're all ears, and sounds like that there is going to be plenty of activity in 2024, and I think you've outlined some very good areas where we potentially might see some. So thanks very much for your time and for your discussion. And yeah, maybe we'll catch up this time next year and see exactly what happened in 2024.
Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate the time, Tim, and always nice to talk with you. Thanks a lot.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.